Hello. Timmy's actually got his eyes on this. Hey, Timmy. That's what you want to play with. Hey, Timmy. Hey, guys. Hi, Git from Sweden. I must say, you've often, what does it say? Something about an error occurred. Is there a problem? Timmy, have you hit a button or something? It's not a great start. An error occurred. Guys, can you see me? It says an error occurred, playback ID. I don't know what that means. Guys, can you see me? I can't see myself on the video. I don't know what's really going on. That's really weird. It says an error occurred, please try again. I wonder what that is. It's on my end. Okay. I wonder what that's all about. Timmy hit my keyboard, and I don't know if that created some problem. I don't know what's going on. Alexandra, I'm from South Africa, but live in the UK. The weird thing is I can see my chat, but I can't see the video. But I guess if you guys can, then that's fine. Timmy, come. I'm trying not to cause a huge disaster again. See, the keyboard is right down here, and Timmy sort of kicks out because he wants to be comfortable, and then he kicks the keyboard. I see you. Good morning from Modesto. Wow, so you're from Modesto, Scott Peterson country, right? I guess some news is filtering through in Modesto about the trial and about Lacey and all that kind of thing. Hey, it's probably starting to build up a little bit. Belinda van den Heever, I love Timmy. Timmy, everyone loves you. Timmy, everyone loves you. Looks like he's feeling sorry for himself. I wonder what is... Barbara says, I'm watching with my cat. Okay. Wonder what is going on that I'm getting this strange error message. Good evening from Dubai. Timmy's looks like it's going to be a restless live with him. See if I'm still getting this error message. I was on time today, but yeah, I'm still getting an error message. Okay. So can you guys all see me? Rose, DeGerrit, or Timmy. Welcome everyone just joining in. The Peterson case is a fiasco, yeah, that's for sure. Well, it's a little bit disconcerting just seeing an error occurred, but I guess if you guys are fine, then it's fine. So we're going to be talking about premeditation in this video. Obviously, just a disclaimer. Stephanie, I'd like to start over, but I guess if you guys are okay, then it's okay. I just don't understand when I refresh the screen, it still won't show anything. So I'm not quite sure I understand. Like the thing I'm a little bit nervous of is recording this live and then no one else can see it. I'm a little bit nervous of that. Timmy has the best eyebrows. Mine are coming along as well. So I'm just going to take the risk. I mean, if you guys can see me, I guess it's fine. So just obviously a disclaimer. Barry Morphew, like anyone else in a case that is sub judice, is innocent until proven guilty. So what we're dealing with in this episode, in this discussion, is if there was premeditation, how might it have played out, right? That's really what we going to be pondering, speculating about, and sharing our opinions. Pamela says, yes, we can see and hear you. After you get through with the live, restart your computer and your router and you'll be fine. Okay. Stephanie says, give a thumbs up if you've just joined in. So, yeah, I was a little bit early. I think we're still fairly early. I'm going to tell you a little story about my spider teacher, right? You've heard about my octopus teacher. It won an Oscar. It's a South African production. I'm pretty proud of it. I've kind of swum, not in exactly in that area, but I've done a sea swim twice in those seas, if I can put it that way. I've swum very close to a big whale in False Bay, but I very nearly died of hypothermia in one of the second swims that I did. So I kind of know those waters quite well. I know how cold they are, and I have an idea of what went into that. So my spider teacher is a little bit different. It's something that happened in my garden. I don't know if you guys remember, those of you guys who've Scorp, it's not a Netflix series, it's a movie on Netflix. It's called My Octopus Teacher. It won an Oscar, so I really recommend you watch it. I did recommend it to the folks on my Patreon, and a lot of them watched it and were really impressed at the time. And it was like this advanced, not screening because it was on Netflix, but this advanced knowledge, and then it obviously won the Oscar. So those of you following me on Instagram may remember I put up a short video clip at night of the spider that was zipping around up and down, building a web, constructing a web really, really, really quickly. And I'll never forget that night. It was just, the spider was literally like Spider-Man. The speed that it was going up and down and just, it was incredible. It was literally like watching Spider-Man. Going up, almost invisible because it was dark. You couldn't necessarily see where he was attaching the web, and then he was spinning this elaborate web. Very beautiful, concise, meticulous, systematic web. And then the next morning it was gone, and I thought, had a bird caught it the next morning, because there are lots of birds in the garden. Some of them are insectivores. And then the same thing repeated itself over and over again. At dusk, when it was getting dark, the spider would come out, spin the web, and then would be gone the next morning. And then a friend of mine came over, and I knew that she doesn't like spiders, so I didn't really want to tell her about it, because I thought she would kill it. It was, I think, a poisonous spider, but a really beautiful spider. In the beginning, you would look at it with a bit of horror. And this went on every single day for weeks that became months, that became the entire summer, autumn. And then I obviously went on holiday. When I came back, the spider was still doing its thing. And then obviously I noticed it was getting colder, it was getting dark earlier, and the spider would not spin as big a web. The web was getting smaller. And then I eventually noticed that the spider wasn't, there really wasn't much of a web. It was really the spider just sort of hanging a little bit under the bird dish where it always was. And I kind of got the sense of the octopus teacher where the life force of that creature has dissipated. It's actually managed to survive its lifespan, but it just doesn't have really much left in it, if you know what I mean. And so it was just quite sad to see that, that it survived the whole summer, and just they don't live longer than about 1 year. That's sort of their time. And then basically the spider was basically just, there's virtually no web. It was just there. It had come out at night and it was just sort of hanging there. And I don't know whether I don't know what it would possibly be able to eat, given how very little web there was left. And then a day or 2 or 3 ago was a very, very cold night, and then just never saw the spider again. And I guess the lesson out of that, Stephanie says, did it leave behind its offspring a spider sac? There are 2 silky kind of cocoon things under the tray of the bird feeder tray. I really don't have any idea what that is. I don't know if it's a moth or some kind of beetle. I don't know if it's a spider thing. No idea, but I guess it could be. But the thing that I kind of wanted to say is, if you're lucky enough to be like that spider or the octopus we saw in the Octopus Teacher, and I'm talking about you, and you're lucky enough to live your entire quota of life that you have, what are you going to do with it? Because like what that spider did, because he was a spider or she was a spider, I don't know if it's a he or she, its job every day was just to come out at that certain time and spin this web. And that's what it did. Do you know what your job is? Do you know what your job is, what you need to do or what you still need to do? And in true crime, we spend a lot of time looking at people who lost their lives in a shocking way. They died too soon. With the Watts family, it was, little children and a mother, pregnant lady in her early 30s, also an unborn child. That child never even saw the light of day. To have their lives snatched away, that's one thing. Suzanne Morphew was 49 years old. But what about us who are still here? And what are we going to do with our lives? We can look at these cases and people experiencing something very unfortunate, but what are you going to do with your life force, right? And I look at my dog, and I also want to make sure in a way that he has the best life, because he's I think only going to live, I'm not sure what it is, if it's 12 years or whatever. And in a way, I want to make sure each day is a good day for him, and in a way that then means it's a good day for me. But I just want to share that sentiment with you guys, you know what I mean? That we should take away from the Morphew case the fact that, someone was deprived of their lives, but we haven't been, right? 7 times shorter than humans, okay. I'm not going to say your name, the avatar that said that. Okay, so I just wanted to share my spider teacher thing with you. I think what is quite weird is how it's an insect, and I kind of felt, it's not actually an insect, it's a arachnid. You sort of would come back from walking the dog every night and then look, and then there it was. And it was almost like a friend, even though it's something poisonous, it was like a companion. It was like a part of the exotic tapestry of my garden. You know what I mean? Part of the diversity of life kind of thing. Stephanie, there's a chap on here, Brent Montgomery. I just want you to watch what he says, because he's making some, let's just say, interesting statements. He's also emailed me, and I just keep an eye out on that fellow, Brent Montgomery. So in this episode, we're going to talk about the 3 layers or 3 dimensions of the premeditation. We're going to talk about, I've kind of made notes here. I really want to show them to you, but I've got this guy to look after. I'll put him down in a second. But it's basically the rear view aspect, which is just like looking back over the timeline and saying, these are some of the big puzzle pieces, right? But what we're doing is reverse engineering the crime scene back to the context, and then saying these big puzzle pieces stand out, right? but it's kind of particular to the crime scene. Then the second dimension is sequential. So it's looking at it in the chronology that this case played out. So going forward in time, going through the backstory forward, and then we're looking at the milestones. What are the big milestones in the story? And then the third area is what I call the Richter scale of anxiety. It's basically those factors that would ratchet the tension up. And so basically the three areas are big puzzle pieces, milestones, and the big puzzle pieces are related to the crime and the crime scene and things around that. And then finally, the clouds of emotion, how they started swirling and eventually became a storm, right? So if we go to the rear view aspect, right? Now we're dealing with how could premeditation have come about, right? And what we're doing here is sort of coming to it via three layers or dimensions. We're sort of trying to look at the same thing, but through three different perspectives. So through this rear view perspective, we thinking about it in terms of opportunity, right? As I say, we're trying to reverse engineer. We're looking through the rearview mirror and we're trying to reverse engineer the events. So we're going backwards in time to understand how this happened. And so this is the part that I think is quite a useful insight, right? And the thing is, whoever committed this crime probably felt that he needed the children, the daughters, Mallory and Macy, to not be home. Do you follow? So let me say that again. Whoever was preoccupied with what is going to happen to I think, yeah, thanks, Stephanie. That's exactly what I was going to ask you to do. So whatever's going to happen to Suzanne was a scenario of, well, in order for there to be an opportunity, in order for there to be the coast being clear, the daughters, Mallory and Macy, needed to be somewhere else, right? Are you following, right? So someone said they planned for the daughters not to be home. It's possible that they did. It's also possible that the daughters would have made plans for themselves and someone was observing this and paying attention to this. Now, bear in mind, what we know for a fact is that Barry told Lauren Schaff that he'd been kind of planning the construction of some wall for a month. Do you remember that? That he was preoccupied with a landscaping job, I think in Broomfield. He would later say he was in Denver, but he was specifically in Broomfield. And yeah, Tim is out. Eh? So the feeling I get is that there was a need to coordinate him not being at home as well. So coordinate the daughters not being home and him not being home either. So this sort of scenario of nobody's home, right? Do you follow what I'm saying? So if you think about it in a scenario where either someone said, hey guys, do you want to go camping? How about this weekend? How about that weekend? Or they probably would go camping habitually anyway. Maybe it was an annual thing. Maybe it was a seasonal thing. Who knows? I don't really know what the situation was. Maybe the church camps were announced in church and they were all aware of it. Maybe Suzanne was even aware of it. But the point is that provides kind of an opportunity. Now, you might think, okay, I think that's just so basic. I mean, you know, but if you think about something else like an affair, and take the Chris Watts case, you think about something like an affair. Well, Chris Watts struck when the iron was hot, in the sense that when Shanann and the kids were out of town, and he knew about this departure and the length of it long before it happened. It wasn't as though Shanann just said, okay, I'm leaving, and then she left a week later. I think that was planned something like months before, if not close to the beginning of the year, right? And so that is giving him opportunity. Now, I'm not saying that Chris Watts premeditated the murder of his family as soon as he found out Shanann was going away for a few weeks. I'm just saying that's how it starts. You have the opportunity, and then something happens, and then, right? Now, in this case, I think the premeditation occurred before the time. I'm going to get to that in a moment, but what I think could have happened is you have a scenario where Suzanne gets cancer, Suzanne gets ill, and there's this sense of, and it's not necessarily solicited, it's not like someone's rubbing their hands or looking at their watch or something like that. It's an unsolicited thing of, wow, I'm trying to kind of get my life going, and this has happened to my partner that we can't control, and it's putting us in opposite directions. Now, Plunder made a fantastic video, I think it's her last video, or I'm not sure if she's put one up since then, but about the transformation of Barry, how his weight fluctuated. And I never really noticed that, because you don't get to see quite so much of Barry as you did of Chris Watts, but you can definitely see that there are times where he's pretty overweight, and the other times where he's really fit, where he's actually quite, he's an older dude, but he's actually pretty muscular, and it even looks like he shaves his chest, kind of thing, right? And so that definitely seems to confirm this sports dude. I actually wrote something down. I don't know what I did with it. Someone actually made a comment not long ago, BMOC. Do you guys know what that is? Timmy, come in. Do any of you guys know what a BMOC is? My thing's still saying error occurred. Okay, so BMOC is a big man on campus, and the irony is the BM corresponds to Barry Morphew as well, big man on campus, right? So I must say, that was kind of an intuitive thing, but it feels like it's being reinforced. The sense that Barry was sort of a kind of a big shot and very masculine and quite a dominant figure, with lots of testosterone and a lot of intensity, and that is playing into this, I think, quite a lot. That aspect, I think you've got to really look at. Big man on campus, that's right. So I'm going to just give you a little bit of personal, what's the word? I guess insight. I'm 49 years old. When I went on this holiday, I was staying at a friend's house. He's 50. This year, this friend of mine has done some incredible things. He took part in SA road cycling. He came third in his age group. He took part in South African mountain biking championships, fell twice, but he came, I think, fifth or sixth or something. But the thing that is happening is, it's a big deal to him that he's 50 years old. And I've known this guy since university. We did triathlons and duathlons together and lots of other things. And it's quite a big thing when you've been a successful sportsman, where you've physically excelled. I mean, he's also a very clever guy and also quite a wealthy guy, but where you sort of have this thing of, I'm getting older. Right, and I'm talking about a sportsman getting older can have kind of a moment, especially at a milestone time, where he says, I'm not going to go gently into the night. I'm going to fight this. I'm going to stay in shape. I'm going to get that new lease on life. And the question is how? How are you going to get that new lease? Are you going to get divorced and marry someone else? Are you going to take up, bungee jumping or skydiving or hunting? What are you going to do? What are you going to do to get that thing? And I spoke about the spider earlier. You might also be a spider that feels, you've gotten caught in your own web. How are you going to get out of that and kind of become who you think you are? And we are what we repeatedly do, and that applies to all of us. We are what we repeatedly do, and that can be kind of an indictment of us. So, for example, when I was writing books over and over again, yes, I am a writer, but don't I want more to life than just writing books? Don't I want more to life than just a pile of books? And that was definitely true for me. So when I went on this holiday, this friend was sort of trying to kind of cajole me and remind me, do you remember what a good cyclist you were? Remember what a good triathlete you were? Remember how fit you were? Remember how low your resting heart rate was? And just reminding me of all of these things, and it resonated. I mean, I was inspired, and I was encouraged, and I was embarrassed by how fit and strong he was. Even his wife was like running things that everyone else would hike, she would just run, kind of thing. But the point is that is something that can be a very important part of the psychology of certain people. Some people, fitness isn't a big deal, and that whole narrative just slides by them. But other people, it can be a very big deal. And you are caught up perhaps in your own legacy or in daydreams of your life when you were whatever, some kind of star. And there's a part of you that wants that again. You want to re-experience it. I think someone said happiness is the longing for repetition. I think part of that is true to some extent, where you long to repeat something that you've already experienced. Not exactly the same thing, but that same thing, right? It might be falling in love. It might be winning some event or whatever, experiencing a certain thing. So I just wanted to share that with you. And I want to be careful projecting into this case, but I also feel like there are certain areas that I can definitely identify with, because we're a similar age. And I also came from a background where sporting achievement was respected and seen as like all or nothing, right? So just coming back to the rear view. So Timmy's not sitting on me, so I can kind of do this. Just coming back to the rear view. What I was saying is, in terms of premeditation, the moment that it became clear that the girls would be out of town, bear in mind they were far out of town. It wasn't like they just went to Boulder. They would be so far out of town that even if they changed plans, it would be hours and hours before they came back. So when they were in Idaho on this camping trip, that when it was like confirmed we're going to Idaho, so first of all, the confirmation that was happening at some prior date, that would have been a signal that, okay, ting, 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 you have the opportunity. Then the other part, which is another layer to it, which is the moment they left, and I guess the moment they got there, would be another confirmation that this is still on. We are still to do whatever. Do you get what I'm saying? So Stephanie says, I wonder how long before their trip was planned. That is the question. And so that is something the investigators, lawyers would probably need to ask them. That's going to be a very important part of this case, is to find out the answer to that particular question, right? Then in terms of the sequential aspect, can you see it there? So in terms of the sequential aspect, we're looking at the chronological backstory, and we're looking at milestones there. And I've really got to pick up my notebook here. just made a couple of notes. So in terms of the sequential aspect, we're looking at milestones. We're looking at things like domestic violence. Did it happen? Did it happen? How often did it happen? What were the significant milestones in terms of that? Were there any? Were there any black eyes, doctor visits? That's something that the lawyer is also going to need to establish. And I mean, that is like an aggravating feature. I think we mentioned it in the, it's been sort of mentioned in the comments dealing with the domestic violence charge, which is an aggravating factor. How do I say that? Is it Karu Ross? Thanks very much. New chew toy for Timmy. I actually went and bought Timmy some food today, so that should almost cover it. Thanks a lot. Then I think another milestone is cancer. Now I'm separating puzzle pieces from milestones. Milestones are like life milestones, right? Things that ordinarily happen in the course of life, but which might aggravate someone who's being tempted towards criminal psychology, right? Stephanie says, I wonder if it was supposed to include Mother's Day. That's a good question if Mother's Day was part of the plan. It seems strange because you'd think if Barry wanted to make the case that he loved his wife as he did in the video, the thing he posted on Facebook, if Barry wanted to make the case that they were a happy, loving family, then I don't know if it makes the case that no one was home on Mother's Day. He wasn't home, his daughters weren't home, and I do think it's quite interesting the fact that when he wasn't there, he said to the neighbor, is a mountain bike there? I mean, of all the things that she could have done that day, why would she go mountain biking? Unless she was doing it really regularly. But it seems just quite strange that him not being there, he would say, well, is a mountain bike there? So the cancer, I think, is definitely an important milestone, not just her cancer, the fact that she had cancer before, but also her father getting cancer. I think that was also something that clicked in Barry's mind. Now, this is what I mean. If her father got cancer, then Barry would be thinking that is going to cause a massive distraction for the Mormon clan. People are going to be rallying around that patriarch. They're going to be sitting around his bed. They're going to be concerned about him. And that's going to be where the attention is. Not only that, Gene himself isn't going to be able to do anything. He's not going to be able to look physically for his daughter. He's not going to be able to really interfere. He's going to be kind of out the picture. Stephanie says, I would imagine mountain biking after just finishing cancer treatments would be ambitious. Stephanie, I think there's a certain amount of fitness anyway with Suzanne. I mean, I get the feeling that she was someone who kept fit anyway, but we do know that she had her last cancer treatment or she had some kind of doctor's appointment on that Monday. So I don't know whether she was kind of recovering and becoming healthy. That itself is quite an interesting question, was she healthy enough to mountain bike? If she was, and Barry seems to be suggesting she was, then doesn't that mean she was coming out of whatever, she was like a kind of a convalescence? And if she was coming out of that, would she have become aware of certain things that he didn't want her to become aware of? And an example is a little bit like with Chris Watts. Shanann was coming back from North Carolina. Was Chris Watts worried that she would become aware of certain things when she arrived home? Like, why are you late on this day and on that day? Why are you on your phone? You know what I mean? And the problem was he was worried. And so the question with Barry Morphew and Suzanne Morphew is, was Barry worried when the cancer part was over, she would realize that he was doing something that he shouldn't have been doing, right? I also think that if you say that there was this midlife crisis thing going on, that he wanted the second lease on life, that it may well have included a mistress or another woman or some kind of affair or whatever, that where he was going to feel masculine and strong, and wasn't that what all the working out was about? Wasn't that, isn't there a little bit of a parallel with Chris Watts working out, getting buff, and it's directed actually to someone? Is in his case, he wants to look young, doesn't he? He wants to look, or he doesn't want to look old. He wants to be desirable and so on. And what you notice with Barry and Suzanne is that they're quite an attractive couple. They're actually a very attractive couple. They've kind of got movie star good looks in a way. Maybe that's pushing it a little bit, but they also, they've got nice teeth. They've got beautiful daughters, and Barry sort of is although he's quite a rough guy, he's sort of quite groomed. He's sort of got quite a hip haircut and all of that kind of thing. So going back to milestones, I think the move was a big milestone. The move from Indiana to Colorado, and one's got to wonder what the circumstances were around that. Why did they want to move? Why then? Why choose that time to move? Bear in mind, for Suzanne, her father was quite old. I think he would have been 87 or so then. So it probably didn't suit her to move then, probably didn't suit him either. Something that I've been wondering about, just because you are kind of applying some of what we knew in the Watts case to this, and just wondering, also to some extent in the Patrick Frazee case, even to some extent from the Robert Durst case, were there grudges? Were there grudges amongst some of these family members? Meaning, did Suzanne hold grudges against her siblings or vice versa? And Barry took advantage of that. In other words, to that extent, she may have been isolated. Now, bear in mind, with Chris Watts, Shanann and his parents sort of were kind of in a grudge match just before the crime happened. In the Patrick Frazee case, there were sort of grudges also between the Frazee siblings, and their father had just died as well, and they stood to inherit money. In the Robert Durst case, there were definitely grudges between the heirs to that fortune. So were there grudges in this case? And the reason I kind of ask it is, why did Gene say in that video that, he's not hearing from his granddaughter? So at that stage, Suzanne had been missing for quite a while, and his daughters hadn't reached out to him. Why? What was that about? But it's not just on the one side of the family. Were there what grudges were going on? Because what grudges can potentially show, and this really has more to do with the Richter scale of anxiety, it could show that there was social death preceding actual death, or the threat of that. So I think his father, so we're talking about milestones. Again, this is to do with the sequential backstory. Another milestone was his father's death, right? And it happened in May. I think it was 2006 or something like that. But the fact that it happened in May, I think, means that every May there's a kind of an awareness of the shadow of death, the darkness creeping that he's trying to get away from. My mother died in October, early in October, and when that date approaches and when it passes, I'm always aware of it. It's a weird time because over here tends to be cold and restless in terms of the weather. It tends to be gusty and dusty, and you often have horrible days where the weather's neither here nor there. That always reminds me of that time. Then, I mentioned her father's cancer. Then there was also the house sale in Indiana. They'd lived in that house for a really long time, so that's also a milestone, selling that house, but then also not selling the house. Does the milestone kind of turn into a millstone, right? And then another milestone is something like an inheritance. That can really be a big one. Think about an inheritance where your partner gets money, but then because you're married, you've got to share it, or you're expected to share it. And then maybe you do share it. How do you feel about it afterwards, right? I think Maureen is saying the Indiana house was sold, yes, but it didn't sell for a while. So you must bear in mind they bought the house in Colorado, and then months went by before they eventually sold the house in Indiana. And I think they sold the Indiana house fairly cheap. And that's the other part is, when you've already bought another house, you're under pressure to sell the house you've got. What do you do with that, right? And that brings us to the Richter scale of anxiety. What things could have ratcheted up the tension? So I think, I think a lot of people here will probably disagree with this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think anyone is capable of murder. In fact, I would say everyone is capable of murder, right? And you say, no. Other people are monsters. They are sociopaths. They've got schizophrenia. They've got mental disorders. I would never commit murder. But if you ratchet the tension up and the anxiety up with almost any person, let's just take a scenario. You put any person, let's say a person that's in chat here, and you put that person, say, in an arena, and you bring out someone else, and you just have that person provoke this person constantly, spit on them, slap them, kick them, throw things at them, injuring them progressively more and more and more. And the person in chat may have said, no matter what, I'm not gonna respond. I'm gonna turn the other cheek. I think a point's gonna come where you eventually not gonna turn the other cheek. And if your life is at stake, and I'm not talking about your actual life, I'm talking about the life that is almost your symbolic life. If you feel that is at stake, you might do something that you didn't think you were capable of. And certain ways that your life could be at stake is if you lose or think you're going to lose all your money, or you think you're going to lose your house, or you think you're going to lose your family, or you think you're going to lose your reputation, or you think the future that you think you're entitled to is going to be lost or burdened or something like that. Rhonda says it's very difficult being a caregiver and spouse when your spouse has cancer. It affects the caregiver mentally, emotionally, and physically. So let's just see what I've written here. This has definitely been a weird episode, just given these error messages. Let's just see if they disappear now. Still there. It's kind of so. In terms of the third level layer, it's the tension layer. Were there affairs? Who had the affairs? And I think somewhere I may have said something about them being married for 32 years. I think I got that from Barry saying, she's put up with me for 32 years, but I think they'd been together for 32 years. I think they only got married in 1994. But through the course of that period, was there any infidelity? And you can kind of imagine over that span of time, surely it had happened once or twice, or how often did it happen? Barry Morphy was never a carer. He may have been, just like Chris Watts may have been a carer at one point, but he may have felt like, not again, right? I've already mentioned the cancer, but I think the cancer would have ratcheted up the tension. I think if there was debt, that could have done the same thing. We spoke about it earlier when we spoke about unequally yoked. If the one spouse is accruing debt or earning money or spending money or whatever, just in terms of that area, if it's kind of unequal, then you can have problems. And my father was a property developer. He worked in construction, and what I remember quite clearly from those days is he would earn quite a lot of money from a job, but then he wouldn't spend it because you'd need that money to buy bigger equipment and all that kind of thing. So in other words, he needed that money to invest in expensive equipment. And I remember he would buy cranes and scaffolding and earth-moving equipment and so on and so on and so on. And that stuff's not cheap at all, right? And so one wonders what was the case with Barry, how much money he had to invest in his business and how his business was going. Bear in mind, him going from Indiana, which he knew, which he'd known for decades, to Colorado, which is a completely different environment. Was he able to get the job done? Was he able to make money? Was he doing a good job compared to other people there? Did he sort of do something and lose money? You know what I'm saying? Sometimes that happens. You can take on a project and underestimate the market or whatever. Orlando, Florida, #1 fan. Thanks a lot. Is your name Orlando, Florida? It's an unusual avatar. Thank you. Thanks very much. But what I'm trying to get at with the business that Barry was in, it's not small investments that need to be made in equipment like a Bobcat and all that kind of thing. It's those things have got to be bought along with the house that is bought, right? You can maybe compare it to Shanann Watts buying all the product in terms of her Thrive. Now, what's interesting with Shanann Watts and Barry is they'd both been in their respective businesses in Colorado for probably about 2 years. Shanann had stopped her job and was thriving full time, and she was at about the 2-year mark, around maybe a little bit less. But it's interesting that she was doing the same thing. She was buying product, investing in her business, and wasn't Barry doing the same thing? Just in a basic sense, right? And then I think another thing that can bring about tension is you have the psychology of, I want a new lease on life. I'm getting older and I want to kind of do this now. I want to hunt, and I want to be an outdoorsman, and I want to be buff, and I want to, whatever. And then things may happen that you didn't expect, like someone getting cancer, like debt and money problems. That's not really helping you get to where you want to go. And I can give you just a little example just from recently. When I went on this little holiday, part of it was, I wanted to exercise, I wanted to train, I wanted to do all sorts of things. And and quite a few things went wrong. And so a holiday is maybe quite a good analogy where, okay, now I want to have fun. Now I want to enjoy myself. Now I want my little short-term fairy tale. And so there's a little bit of pressure now on you for that. And then when you're not getting that thing that you expect or you feel entitled, there's a bit of kind of desperation, disappointment, and kind of a feeling of not of panic, but kind of existential angst, isn't there? Are you guys still there? Let me. Hi, everyone here today. Are you guys still there? I just got a message on my phone saying something failed. We are here. Okay. Resentment. Yeah. So can you see what I'm talking about? It's you kind of have a shift in your mind where your mental space is like a prison, but by saying, I want this fairy tale, that creates a different kind of prison. And you've got to be careful with that. I think another thing that could have ratcheted up the tension is the more for your children maturing, the more for your children individuating. I don't know whether I can compare my friend David to a situation where he got diagnosed with cancer and he had a mild heart attack at the same time that his children were writing their final exams and going on their sort of prom night dances. And so at the same time that his children are wanting to step out into the world, he's working his Ollie off so that he can provide for them and give them kind of what they want. But he also wants to, we would play tennis matches as well. But do you get what I'm saying? Is it's creating this speed bump with the life force, potentially. And so with the daughters individuating, the daughters are going on dates, and perhaps that causes a bit of a tension. I don't want you seeing this person or whatever. The daughters want to study here or there, and they want this or that for their lives. And doesn't that remind the parents, I should also be living? I also should be looking out, should be worried about my appearance, and, daughters going to gym and staying fit and Instagramming, or what about me? Maybe I should also stay with it and be attractive, kind of thing, right? So I think that the daughters individuating could have provided all sorts of stress of their own that is very difficult to quantify, financial, emotional. I don't know which daughters got along with which parent, but certain crises in their lives could also have led to certain things happening. Talking about boyfriends, going to college and all those little dramas. Then bringing this all together, you sort of say, okay, well, so when did this happen? When does this clock of premeditation sorry, when does this clock of premeditation start to, those clock ticks, when do they start getting louder and louder? So something I asked on Patreon was, who called 911? Well, let me ask you guys. So I think it's an incredible question because we don't know the answer. Think about the Chris Watts case. We knew almost immediately who called 911, right? We knew almost immediately, and we knew who it was, Nicole Atkinson. It wasn't Chris Watts. It wasn't Shanann's family. It wasn't a neighbor. It wasn't a work colleague. It wasn't Nicole Kessinger. Heavenly Cloud says, I love your voice. It makes me so relaxed. I get sleepy. You're perfectly welcome to fall asleep. You don't need to You don't need to pay attention to what I'm saying. Cancer didn't go away because Suzanne did. That's true. But if she'd survived the cancer, the cancer could come back again. Targol Tran, thanks a lot for that. Targol is very active lately on Patreon. So, it's good to see you there. You make some good points. If you guys want to join the really a nice, mature, clever, sometimes witty community on True Crime Rocket Science, just head on to Patreon. You can join for $1 a month, and you can also get a discount. I think you can pay $10 or $11 to get a yearly subscription. Then you don't renew every month. And we're talking about the Robert Durst case. We're talking about Everest, the Everest disaster. I'm sharing a little bit of my experience climbing Kilimanjaro, but there's also quite an interesting community talking about other things like Everest and so on. We're also talking about the Ripper investigation. I'm supposed to do another episode on John Benet Ramsey. I've just got so little time, but I'm going to try and do it tomorrow. So anyway, coming back to who called 911, who do you guys think it was? So put down 1 if you think Bria Lace's best group ever. Thanks, Bria. Bria's in France. Really, I'm going to be going to France again, not in not the too distant future. There's a chance I might be going to Greece. I don't know when, though. I hope it's this year, but we'll see. My friend who knows about that, if you're watching, hi. Okay, and so if you think it was Barry who called 911, put a 1. If you think it was his daughters who called 911, put a 2. And 911 was called at, I think, around about 5:45 on Mother's Day, so quite late after she disappeared, in the sort of afternoon, evening period. I think almost a similar time to when, in the Scott Peterson case, when 911 was called, sort of at the end of the day. Then do you think it was a neighbor who called? That's number 3. So 1 is Barry, 2 is the daughters, 3 is a neighbor, 4 is a friend of Suzanne's, and 5 is Andy Moorman. So a lot of people are saying neighbor. A lot of people are saying neighbor. Does anyone know if it was the neighbor? Like has that been confirmed? Because as far as I know, we don't know. As far as we know, we don't know who called 911. There are a couple of people here who are saying Barry Morphew did. I can kind of understand that Barry would have, because he would have had to eventually. So, for example, if when Chris Watts arrived home and Coonrod wasn't there and Nicole Atkinson was there and she'd already called 911, but they still hadn't arrived, she probably would have pushed him to call 911. So you could have a situation like that. I'm not saying it's out of the question, but it does seem very unlikely that he would have called them. It also feels a bit unlikely that his daughters would have. It's possible maybe that one of them did, but it does feel like Barry should have called, yes, but it does feel like a neighbor may have called, which is a problem if that's true. Sassy Cat says a controlling person is extremely insecure. Michelle says, I take that back, number 3. Targol Trans says 3. Half Ratter says, I think one of the daughters called. It could have been one of the daughters, but they may also have been led to believe from their father that, maybe she's still coming back from a mountain bike ride, or maybe she's still, you could have had a situation like that. it was reported as the neighbor. If you say that, where's your source? Because I've looked into it and I haven't found any information about that. So if you can confirm that it was a neighbor, then that would be, that I would certainly have learned something. Okay, so you say Googled it and they said the neighbor. Who said the neighbor? Fact, neighbor. I think they said it was the neighbor. Okay, but we're looking for definite. We're looking for Lauren Schaaf saying a neighbor called. Which neighbor? Yes, Stephanie says, who is they? See, and so this is what we were speaking about earlier, where I said, someone was saying, why don't you look at other channels? And a question like this, if somebody else says a neighbor called, is that fact or is it fiction? So this is a question that I think addresses that problem, is how do you know? If I could say something now, and how do you know if that's fact or fiction? Pawel Sursky, would it make any sense that a family member wouldn't call 911 right away because that would mean they're in a way accepting something was wrong? I think that is part of it, that you can be in denial. Or not even the denial, you may think something rational, like, did a friend come and pick her up? Did she go for a walk? Something like that. Do they? Another question I've got is, did the Morpheus not have dogs, their own dogs? Because you would kind of wonder, an outdoors guy like Barry, wouldn't he have kept dogs? Wouldn't they have kept their own pets? So Laura Bell says, who do you think called? I think it was likely the neighbor, just because I've got a hard time imagining Barry did, but I suppose Barry could have called. They'd recently gotten a kitten. That's interesting. So I wonder where the kitten was when people arrived back. I mean, if everyone's left home, who's looking after the kitten, if that's true? Barry seems to me to be the kind of guy who would have a proper dog, like a Alsatian or a Rottweiler or a Border Collie or something, like a proper dog, not a little Schnauzer or something like that. Yvonne says, I don't have a source, but I heard early on that the girls called the neighbor when they couldn't get hold of their mother. Yeah, that's true, but did the neighbor call 911? Now, if you think about it, it does make sense that the neighbor would call 911 in the sense that Barry doesn't want to be home and he's sort of not home, and also the girls aren't home. So who's going to be the first one to appreciate that something's going on? And wouldn't it be the neighbor who found the bicycle? Now, I'm pretty sure the bicycle was set up the way that it was found, right? But who would have found it? And wouldn't it have been the neighbor? And then wouldn't the neighbor have said, okay, I see this bicycle. This looks like trouble. I'm going to call 911. Thinking Suzanne may be injured, but something is wrong. She probably wouldn't have thought murder, but she probably would have thought injured, something's wrong, and then call 911. Does that make sense? So someone says, this is hearsay. I thought that Barry asked the neighbors to check up on her as they couldn't. Yes, that's true. I don't think it's hearsay in the sense that it's just what Barry said, because we know that the neighbor did check up. And I think Barry said, is a bicycle there? But we do know that the neighbor did check. So I think that is true. Okay, ABC News reported neighbor called, May 5th news article. Okay, well, there you go. So there it is. So if that is a fact, and it looks like it is a fact, and congratulations to the majority of my patrons who I think by far the majority, like 95%, thought that it was the neighbor. I was one of them, thought that that was the case. But the one thing that we haven't gotten is that 911 call. We haven't heard that 911 call. So that's something else that we're sort of holding out to. Thanks for the compliment, Michelle. Your voice throws me. Don't know what that means. Okay, so I've definitely learned something. I didn't know for a fact that the neighbor had called, so that's quite interesting. I do know that the neighbor was summoned and that the neighbor probably found the bicycle and looked in the garage. We know about that. Okay, so the other thing that I think is very important in terms of those puzzle pieces that I mentioned, if we're talking about premeditation, was you needed two. These are, I think, the two big aspects in terms of the premeditation. The one is the opportunity when the girls would be not a little bit out of town, but totally out of the way. So in other words, giving the space of at least a full day, right, for foul play. That's the one thing. The other thing is, I think the perpetrator needed to give himself room for an alibi or for a, to almost do the same thing, to also put himself out of town. So the girls are out of town, and so the perpetrator also needs to do the same thing. I was in Denver. I wasn't home, kind of thing. And it's, to me, very similar to Chris Watts, where Chris Watts hides everything within the fabric of plausible deniability, or the plausible thing of, well, I'm just going to work. I just loaded my tools and went to work. Well, doesn't Barry do the same thing? He loads his tools, except when he goes to the job that he's been planning for a month, he doesn't have the right tools. And his workers are frustrated and angry and annoyed, right? Did he initially mean to just meet one worker there? And then what is that all about? Why was there a hotel room and all of that going on? Interesting is he was, I think, working with Morgan Gentile on the property in Salida on the Saturday. So the day before Mother's Day, guess what he was doing? Guess who he was working with? And so the job in Broomfield is very interesting because that got postponed again and again. And so I kind of wonder whether that postponement was, was related to premeditation, whether premeditation is part of that postponement. Does that make sense? Ken Dalton, maybe the hotel room was for him and Morgan, and then it went when the kids started calling mom. Yeah, I kind of get the feeling that there might be something more to him and her than we know. The fact that Morgan broke up with, or it seems like there was some kind of disruption to her family, suggests that it's not nothing, but it's hard to say. I'm going to say something that's quite controversial that shouldn't be. I think she's quite an attractive lady, and some people, whenever I've mentioned that, they say something about a man who cheats won't necessarily cheat with someone who's more attractive. And I kind of just shake my head at that. I think you would be more inclined to cheat with someone who's more attractive than someone who's less attractive. Not necessarily though, but if a man is in an unhappy relationship and he's sitting in a coffee shop, and someone who's unattractive walks by, I don't know if he's going to notice that person than if someone who's attractive walks by. Just isn't that psychology 101? Do I dye my beard? No, that's quite a weird question. It's a shame that's controversial. Yeah, that's an aspect we don't know. It was whether there was an affair, but what we do know is that there are rumors, that there were rumors of, as far as I know, affairs, plural. Another thing that one's got to be careful talking about, because it becomes either victim blaming or misogynistic or something like that, is you say, this is Suzanne and we all love her and we all sympathize with her and we all feel very bad for what's happening. But if you take the criminal psychology aspect and you say, what is Barry thinking? What is the perpetrator thinking? Then you can also say, how did he feel about what was happening? And there are photos of, and I really wanted to see these, there's photos of Suzanne when she's suffering from cancer, when she's in the hospital, where she definitely looks different to those other photos of her where she looks lively and gorgeous and full of life. She looks kind of the way you'd expect. She looks weary. She's got wrinkles. She looks tired. And yes, she's got cancer. You'd expect all of that. But that's also a reality. That was Suzanne's reality, and that would have been Barry's reality as well. And if you just take that appearance of that particular picture, and you look at a picture of this co-worker that he worked with on the Saturday and that he saw again on the Sunday, they look very different. I'm not going to spell out how. I think you can fill in those blanks. But if you put yourself into Barry's headspace, what do you think he's thinking? What do you think he's feeling? Illness doesn't make you feel sexy. Absolutely. Sandy serious, hi. Barry might have seen Suzanne's text to his sister on the Friday before. That's an interesting question. Do you know what has come up in at least two cases that I find very interesting? The one is the Chris Watts case, and another one is the Jason Roeder case, a South African case. It also involves a mistress and a murder, although that case is under appeal, and a hotel room, by the way. But what is very interesting, I think, with both those cases is I think the unspoken truth or an unspoken area of perhaps insight in both those cases is you may have had a scenario where the husband was able to spy on his wife's phone correspondence through iCloud, right? In other words, both of them have access to one another's iClouds, but if the one was using something like a secret calculator, or the one was, how can I put it, cheating, then they might be able to see what the other one is saying while, in other words, they have that stealth advantage of, I'm cheating on you, I know your movements, I know what you're saying to other people. Meanwhile, I'm hiding my side away, right? And what that can then do as well, theoretically, is if you've got access to the iCloud, can't you delete some of that correspondence after the crime has been committed? Can't you, via the iCloud, access someone's phone? And if Chris Watts did that, he would have seen the possibly seen the correspondence with Shanann, Cassie, and Nicole saying, take the house, F this, F him, all of that kind of thing. He may have seen that. in the Jason Roeder case, he may have been aware of what his wife was actually saying directly to his mistress at the time that it was being said. It's possible that he was able to see that. I wonder what you guys think of that. Do any of you guys have access to a mutual iCloud, for example, of your partner or your children or your husband? Snowflake Forest says yes. I'm not sure if you're responding to what I've said, but it does correspond to this whole idea of control and monitoring. I think a big question is also, did the move to Colorado, did that play into the premeditation? Was the premeditation in place before then? I tend to think not. I wouldn't say that none of the gears were turning, but I would think not. I think a lot of the tensions ratcheted up after they moved to Colorado. I think the Colorado move created a lot of tension. In the same way that when Chris Watts and Shanann moved to Colorado, the tension started ratcheting up when they bought that expensive house. You had the same scenario. My husband doesn't even know what an iCloud is, okay? No way, Jose, I don't monitor anybody, okay? Yes, X downloading everything I did on computer. There you go. Suzanne was a trophy. The move to isolate her. So something I want to also just bring to your attention is the Robert Durst case. The defense have just said there, well, he didn't do it because what would his motive be? And if you apply that to the Barry Morphew case, what do you think? If you look at the Robert Durst case and you say, just sort of throw everything up in the air and say, I don't think he did it because I can't think of why he would do it. Why would he do it? He was wealthy, In his case, it's actually 3 potential crimes. It's almost like he's a serial killer. We can't think of a motive, so he probably didn't do it. I can't think of the reason why he did it, so he must be innocent, right? What about with Barry Morphew? I can't think of a motive, so he must be innocent. Well, what is similar between Durst and Barry Morphew? Control. And again, as I was saying earlier, you can take someone out of chat and put them in an arena and just have someone provoke them. You might say to that person might say, I would never hurt a fly. But if someone started provoking that person, they might hurt a fly, and worse, because they're no longer in control. And if you can be pushed far enough out of control and you're a controlling person, what are you going to do? And you've got to think that beyond your own projection. So you can't think, well, I wouldn't do that, or I'm not like that, or that doesn't make sense, I wouldn't, You've got to think, who is this person I'm dealing with? He's a hunter, well, I'm not a hunter. He was a baseball star, well, I'm not a baseball star. Who is he? And try and get into his feet and into his shoes. And you get a little bit of that when you hear Barry talking. He's an intense individual. His voice rises. You get the sense that he gets agitated pretty quickly. You get the sense that he can lose his temper. He's quite a red-faced guy, but not just that the sun is burning him red, but you kind of get the sense of there's intensity in that redness, right? You know what I mean? And so you can't say, well, if someone does that and I'm not in control, I'm not really going to care. The question is, would he care? Right? Kind of an interesting thing with Chris Watts was building his fitness and all that, and wasn't he worried that was going to go down the drain, that all of that effort into that was going to be lost? And you might think it's a silly scenario, but that's all kind of an investment into his fairy tale, And And I think when he was with his family, when he was with his children, when he was with his wife and children in North Carolina, he couldn't really train, probably couldn't eat well either. And you might look at that and say, well, that's silly. Why would him not being able to eat what he wanted to eat bother him or anyone? Why would him not being able to train? But there's actually a text from Shanann at the time saying she wanted to sleep with him and he was doing push-ups. And she'd had a shower and he wasn't interested. And so what I'm saying is, you wanting to do what you want to do, and wanting to maintain control may be a very, very big deal to you as you start to notice you can't do those things anymore. And what might change that? Well, cancer could, debt could, we can't afford it. All those kinds of things. So quite a good question here, and I think now is a good time to take your questions. What do you think about Barry hiring women? I think you mean a woman. I think that is quite interesting. I mean, if you compare Morgan to Jeff, it's quite a difference. It's quite a big difference, wouldn't you say? And what I also think is quite interesting with Jeff is when Jeff is brought up, Barry instantly says, this guy was in jail for 9 years. And you wonder whether he wasn't trying to bring Jeff into his narrative to draw attention away from him, whether he wasn't trying to use Jeff as a patsy, whether he wasn't trying to use Jeff as a scapegoat. What do you guys think about that? Morgan seems like a fun person. She does. I don't know. To me, she's got a Nicole Kessinger vibe about her. She seems quite casual and maybe reckless, but she's just got she does have a sort of a fun, a youthful vibe to her, I would say. I do want to bring up the wood chipper thing. A lot of you guys have brought it up. It's not a very pleasant thought, but in the beginning when people brought it up, I sort of winced inwardly. But, when you think about the video that I made earlier today about crushing, and you think just in terms of someone who knows forests and someone who deals with timber, I'm talking about a lot. I'm talking about someone who is an outdoor guy who's barbecuing, who is cutting up trees in order to make furniture, who is using timber for landscaping or scaffolding, who is using timber for certain construction, maybe making decks or whatever it is, but kind of in an extreme way. Someone who's doing it a lot, they would probably have access to something like that. And if they'd been doing that through the course of their lives, I would suspect that Barry would have, if he had a kind of a tree, I think he had a tree farm. As far as I know, they had a tree farm in Indiana. If you've got a tree farm, wouldn't you, by default, have a wood chipper? If you have a tree farm, wouldn't you be someone who would make a lot of use of firewood? If you had a tree farm, wouldn't you be someone who would be used to chopping and cutting limbs, I'm talking about tree limbs, and turning a tree into whatever it needs to be turned into? And if you've done that over and over again, and I've said, we are what we repeatedly do. So if you're doing, so what would Barry do more than anything else? Would he reshape earth or would he reshape trees? I don't know. It depends on his backstory. Somebody else says making mulch. But we know that the tree narrative forms quite a big part of this. There are trees all over Colorado. Their home was in the middle of trees. We know that in Indiana, there's trees and I put up a video the other day where you see, I think it's Gene Morphy. Some people have said it's Suzanne's stepfather, but he's wearing a cap with a logo on it. I'm not actually pointing to him, I'm pointing to the cap. And on the cap is a logo for, I think, something about American International Forest something, right? And so it just feels like the entire psychology was caught up in the landscape and in trees. And you might laugh at that and say, well, that means nothing to me, something to them. If you take it further, Gene, I'm not sure if it's Gene or Andy or both of them, but I think they cultivated Christmas trees. So if you're cultivating Christmas trees, you're also going to be dealing with, well, this tree we can't use this tree, and we this one's gotten too big. We need to, I don't know, cut it down, and we can use this one for firewood or whatever. All those things that would be involved in that, right? And so you get a sense that it's quite a big deal. So I do unfortunately think that the wood chipper thing is something to consider. Patricia. So I just want to talk to you a little bit about some books that I've got here at the side. But I've got 3 books here, but I think there's maybe just time to talk about this one. This is an incredible book by Simon Sharma. It's called Landscape and Memory. And I want you to think about that concept and the idea of dust and graves that are named and unnamed graves. But I want you to think about, just in a normal sense of, let's say, centuries ago, there was a village somewhere. I know they've just uncovered a Roman, I think, bathhouse on the coast of Spain. And they sort of took away a sand dune and they found this bathhouse. Annie Thomas, I think a cadaver dog hit on a tree. Thanks, Annie. I've seen that video clip. I've seen those little rocks around it. It's possible, but I've also heard about cadaver alerts on a separate site. So it's either a case that there was a relay of transferring, or that you shouldn't believe everything you hear. It's just difficult to say. Or perhaps that alert wasn't reliable. I hate saying that because I tend to think that cadaver alerts tend to be reliable. But my only problem with that is, if there was an alert, why wasn't there an arrest then and there? I don't know if it's a DA scenario. I don't know. We'll probably know when the affidavit comes out. I hope the affidavit comes out next week. Anyway, just to make my point, in that scenario where they'd uncovered this Roman bathhouse, things get lost in the landscape. Civilizations can become lost in a landscape. Graves, lives. I'm talking about over a long period of time. Not only of people, but of animals. Not only of animals, but of vegetation, of ecosystems. They get lost in time. They get lost in the landscape. So there is a link between landscape and memory. And if you think about memory and you just say, well, if you remember something was there, well, what if you don't? Then something that lived there is just gone. Like that spider I mentioned. What has happened to that spider? Where is that spider? Where are the spider's remains? Is it bird poop? Is it dust? Where is it? And someone made the case that when we walk the earth, we're walking on dinosaur bones, we're walking on crocodiles and rabbits and mice, and it's things that have been turned into dust and swept into the air, and then it circulates and it rains back down, and so on and so on and so on. And so we are actually living in a graveyard in a way, if you think about it in that way, that all dust is a mixture of eroded rock and what used to be something that was alive. Someone really expressed it really well. I can't do as well as that, but it's quite an amazing thought. Heavenly Cloud says that's morbid, but it's also the circle of life. I mean, compost in forests feeds forests. I don't know what you eat today or tomorrow, but the chances are it's giving its life so that you have life. You might not like to think about it that way. You might like to think, I'm eating chicken or pork or whatever, but actually it's not. It was actually a rooster. It was actually a bird, an individual, or it was a particular pig that you ate. It's not just kind of anonymous flesh, right? Wow, there's some pretty, I must say, on the Barry Morphew case, I don't know if it's just that you attract different people, but there've been some very, very horrible and nasty people. I don't know if it's a case that you've got to block a whole new bunch of people, but yeah, it's pretty nasty to see, pretty horrible to see. So in terms of this book, Landscape and Memory, I still want to quote from it. It talks about the ancient history and the recent history of how people progressed in terms of civilization from wilderness to Arcadia. And Arcadia is where the Morpheus are from in Indiana, and Arcadia is a name for utopia. And there's an artist, is it James Cole? I can't quite remember, his surname's Cole, famous American artist who painted these different phases of civilization. And what is fascinating is looking at the importance of forests in that whole mechanism. Hofreiter says if he used a wood chipper and then poured some cement and then soil and plants in various areas, it would be hard to sniff out remains. I think if you used a wood chipper, the what used to be a person now becomes dispersed, and that's going to be very hard to find when a week has gone by, very, very hard to find after a month has gone by, and progressively harder and harder and harder to find. The only thing where there's a little bit of hope in that area is no matter how much you do something like that, you're still going to have fragments that are going to give off cadaver odor. No matter how much you do that, it's still going to have that effect. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a combination of things like a certain amount of fragments in cement, a certain amount in this wall, a certain amount disposed of in a stream, a certain amount burnt, a certain amount buried, kind of thing. I wouldn't be surprised if it's something like that. Sassy Cat says, I wonder what Barry did with all Suzanne's belongings. Thanks, Polythene. Thanks a lot. Where's Trevor Noel? So another case that is, I think, very similar to this one in terms of this outdoor man vibe, this, the masculine side, the outdoors, the terrain being very rough and wild and mountainous, is the Patrick Frazee case. Patrick Frazee was more of a rancher and a cowboy, but you have the same vibe of there also antlers that he was burning, and there's also him being outside all the time and dealing with sometimes sick animals, and how he dealt with that. And the terrain of the Frazee property in Florissant, also the use of other properties. There was a barn in the disposal. I think the Patrick Frazee case is a very good kind of analogy to the kind of person we're talking about here as well, in terms of this rough, the Chris Watts case may be similar in certain ways, but Chris Watts isn't similar. Chris Watts certainly isn't nearly as masculine or as the confidence as some of these men. And so the Patrick Frazee case is quite interesting. It's so close to home that one of the lawyers hired by Barry Morphew represented Patrick Frazie's mistress. That's how close it actually cuts to home. So if you're interested in that case, read my book, Murder Most Foul. It's a pretty gritty story. It's, you know, what shocked me in investigating it and writing about it was that it was in many ways more shocking than the Chris Watts case. A lot more shocking than the Chris Watts case. I was hoping he would start singing. I don't know where Timmy is. Maybe I can summon him with this. I hear something. Yeah, the coolers is definitely another area. It would also be interesting to know if he bought a cooler fairly recently, or even a wood chipper fairly recently. Would be interesting. You know, the other thing is he may have wood chippers in Indiana. Did he leave them there and sell them? And did he buy any wood chippers in Colorado? You know. So looking at credit card statements would also be quite interesting. So Timmy's here. Okay, Timmy, they want to see you. You can't sleep. They want to see you. They want to. You the star. Okay, you're the star. Timmy was probably sleeping. So guys, I'm going to do another live tomorrow on 5 crucial mistakes Scott Fisher made during the Everest disaster. And I'm also going to be dealing with a very seminal moment where there's disagreement between Krakauer and Beaucrief. We're going to look at what they both wrote about this seminal moment. And I'm going to leave it to you guys to decide what you think happened. Sometimes when, you know, even though I wrote 3 books on the Everest disaster, you remember some of the broad strokes with some of the details, you know, when you think back, okay, there was some shocking, crazy moments. What were they? Well, this was one of them, but it takes quite a while to recall them, right? It takes quite a while to kind of dredge them up again. By the way, for the folks on Patreon, I'll be uploading, I think, chapter 14 of Neverest a little bit after this. So look out for that. Can you feel the tension in that ratcheting up as well as we deal with more and more dynamics and issues that are going on? Thanks a lot, Stephanie. Stephanie, it's good to have you here. Are you doing something tomorrow? I can't remember if you said you've got to be maybe run tomorrow. Do you think Barry got out of sorts because Suzanne and her father were both going through cancer and he shares potentially fatal blood disease with his father who passed? I do think the cancer with so many people and the fact that his own father died was playing havoc with his own sense of self, his own sense of mortality. Tomorrow, but I will be there for most of it, if not all. Okay. It's been a very weird live just because I've been seeing this error message constantly. Sorry for bringing it up as well, but there you go. I wanted to spend a bit more time dealing with landscape and memory, but I'll probably do an episode on it to sort of cover it. But just on the topic of books, that is something I want to do. I don't know if I'll do it on Patreon or here, but I want to start a book club. This is an excellent book. Simon Sharma is an incredible writer. This is quite a thick book, but it deals with Arcadia and history. It's just, I don't know if you can see that, but it's just paintings of various people. There's a car coming out of a tree, going through a tree. It's just really amazing. So just all the detail, the rich detail that he uncovers. through our history. European history, Roman history, and just like really ancient history as well. So Yari writes, trees have roots, Jews have legs. And I think what he's trying to say there is some people may feel that they're not rooted to the world, that they're rootless. Do you know what I mean by that? They're not anchored. And I know when I moved into this place that I'm staying now, I very quickly planted trees and lots of plants, because up until that point I'd been moving around a lot. So I definitely had this sense of wanting to be anchored, and I did it through my garden. Another book that I want to draw your attention to is this one. It also deals with senescence, which is a new word that I've heard, which is about the body aging. And I think it's very relevant to people going into their 50s and 60s and so on, where you feel, how long can you push away old age? And the answer is, with exercise, you can definitely postpone it. But I read this book while I was on holiday and I really found it interesting. Also deals with anthropological issues, ancient people, and how much exercise did hunter-gatherers get, kind of thing. How much did hunter-gatherers sit? It's really quite interesting. So it's quite a scientific thing. And what I read before I go to bed is this book, which is the book that The Last Kingdom, which is also on Netflix, is based on, with Uhtred of Bebbanburg. And of course, there's the theme of cutting down trees to build ships and fortresses and all that kind of thing, and bows and arrows and so on. But it's something that I want to do more. Is I'm an author. I'm also inspired, not just to write, but by the things that I read, and that's something I'd like to share with you guys. Not just the reading material that I find worthwhile, but what you guys are reading and what you find worthwhile, whether it's my work or something about Jack Reacher or whatever it is. Stephanie says, thank you for your message and contribution, Treasure Cassidy. Maureen, don't over-exercise. Don't over-exercise. At the moment, I've just bought a new mountain bike. I really need to, I'm under-exercising. I think the problem with most people is under-exercising. It's a little bit difficult now because it's winter setting in. I feel like I've got to adjust to the temperature. I think that's also another thing worth noting is this crime happened in May. In the Morphew case, it happened in May, and there's a seasonal shift from May, it's the end of spring and it's the beginning of summer. Right? If you think about what's happening right now in Colorado, those people who are in Colorado, isn't now the time that you start seeing buds and blossoms and starts getting warmer and the snow starts melting? And so it's now literally when new life comes about. What do you guys think about that? Ilva says, we live in Utah and helicopters have been picking up about 7 people a day off the mountain who are not prepared to hike. That's interesting. Where are you from, Ilva? We tend to under-exercise, that's for sure. Seasonal shift in the Watts crime too, absolutely. Absolutely. I think with him, it felt like his endless summer was coming to an end. His summer roller coaster the ride was about to end. He didn't want it to end. Spring fever. Laurie says intermittent fasting. Just got a bike. Oh, really? Mountain bike. Bria says, is she Norwegian? She sounds like she could be. Have any of you guys watched the Eurovision Song Contest? There's like a kind of a funny comedy movie made about it, but the actual song contest, I think, was yesterday. My ancestors are Norwegian. Oh, okay. Did you watch Eurovision Song Contest? Summer Romance. I'm 53 and go everywhere by mountain bike. Okay, that sounds good. Walking is good if nothing else. Yes, the Euro thing with Will Ferrell was hilarious. I love that song that they sing about my hometown. It's just a wonderful song. Fossils and ancient trees are my thing. Oh, okay. Then you would really love this book by Simon Sharma. It talks about green men and ancient forests and the what are those giant trees in California, the sequoias? Okay, guys. I think that's it. Are there any questions here? Are you in the UK right now or South Africa? I'm in South Africa. Conifers, sequoias, yeah. Belinda van den Heefer. Are you in Cape Town, Belinda? I think you've had 2 huge cold fronts there that have come here. I actually hear one of the helicopters right now coming down the mountain. So it's another hiker being rescued. The singer is from Sweden, Molly Sandon. Yeah, it's quite weird having, I think, a Canadian actress impersonating her and doing it quite well. Oh, Johannesburg. Okay. Now, I used to live in Johannesburg. Nice mild weather there. Wonderful summers. Redwoods. Timmy is feeling really neglected. Timmy, I'll be with you in a second. Okay, guys, it's been good talking to you. It's been over 100 minutes. This is it's almost heading to an hour and just over an hour and 45. Sam Costa, I'm in British Columbia. Scorp, thanks for your insight. Thanks a lot. I'm still learning about the Morphy case, but I must say I'm looking forward to the affidavit coming out so that we've got some certainty about things. In this live stream, I think I've learned that a neighbor called 911, but we still don't know the neighbor's name. We don't know who it was. Maybe we'll find out soon enough. Stephanie says, have a good night. Goodbye, chat. Thank you for being here. Thanks a lot, Stephanie. Laurie says, my home state sequoias are awesome. Timmy, everyone wants to see you. Look. Say goodbye, Timmy. That's quite sweet, eh? Okay, guys, thanks a lot for tuning in. I'll see you, those of you interested in the Everest disaster tomorrow. Bear in mind, there's quite a big push to summit Everest going on right now between today and tomorrow. So hopefully people are going to get through that okay. But we'll see what's going on Everest this time, like what's been going on the last 24 hours tomorrow. And then we'll be dealing with that subject matter in tomorrow's live stream. Okay, I hope you have a good weekend until then. Okay, see you guys next time.